Saudi Arabia, so they have an easy time there.
Okay.
Here's our intense author. A few seconds of her.
I love this book because the mother is so cavalier about food.
Mm-hmm.
My in-laws, we were talking about yesterday, things that drive me crazy about food. My in-laws are all like safety conscious to the end. And it was one of the, we have these dreadful Thanksgivings, well, they're not dreadful.
Shifty's working today.
Okay. Hi, we're here for a regular segment talking about books with Nancy Pearl, director for the Center of the Book here in the Seattle Public Library. And today, Nancy, we have two very, very different books.
We do indeed.
Let's talk about the more depressing one first, Flanders by Patricia Anthony.
Well, you know, Sharon, Patricia Anthony is probably best known as a science fiction writer. And it's my fear that people are going to either find this in the science fiction department of their bookstore, or it might be misshelved in the library and appear in science fiction. And then people who might like historical novels will say, "Oh, I don't like science fiction. I don't want to read it." And I would say that what they're missing, this is not science fiction. This is a wonderfully moving novel about World War I.
Right, and it's told in a very interesting way, in a way that was very engaging at the first part. It got a little tiring for me as it went on, but in the form of an American soldier who is fighting with the British in World War I, and it's told in the form of letters to his brother. Why do you think the author took that tact in arranging that?
Partly, I think doing those sorts of epistolary novels, all made up of letters, is a challenge, I think, that an author sets for himself or herself. And I think you picked up on the problem is that originally they're great to read. It's always fun to read someone else's letters, but then it does get a little tiresome. And one of the problems is, or one of the benefits of that is that you really just then see the action through that character's eyes. And if you don't have, if it's not all done in letters, the author has a bigger scope, can sort of change the different viewpoints. And I think that what Patricia Anthony wanted us to do was just be able to get inside this American's head. Which we certainly did.
Right, but then she also has a big plot to move along because there's a murder mystery kind of happening through this. And I think that's where the letters got a little teased, because you had to move that story along because you wanted to see what was going to happen. But you did get the sense of his home life, the troubles, and the background.
And it could be that you didn't even need that much. I mean, maybe it would have worked better as a novel. If they hadn't been letters, maybe it would have moved forward in an easier way so that you wouldn't quite be so aware of the form of the novel.
Right. I also think because it is so gory and very graphic about the battlefield violence, somehow, though, that was easier to take in terms of the letter. I mean, I don't know how you would really describe that, because you're seeing it through those eyes, someone else's eyes. Describing it to you is a little different, I think, than just reading about it graphically. I'm not sure, but
That's interesting.
It's a wonderful novel. What kind of people do you think would enjoy this?
Well, I think anyone who liked Pat Barker's trilogy about World War I regeneration and the ones that followed that would certainly like this. I think anyone who likes a good historical novel would really be taken with this because of the research that obviously went into it.
Right, right. Well, this is a good one for our, it's what, Remembrance Day on November 11th?
Yes,
the day
perfect for that.
Right, so another good novel. But now, total change of pace, and it was wonderful to put down Flanders and then take up Tender to the Bone, which is by Ruth Reichel. And it's about, the subtitle is Growing Up at the Table.
And this is a wonderful memoir. We've certainly seen enough memoirs in the last few years. This is, I think, probably going to be called the decade of the memoir. And some have been tragic and some have been funny. And Ruth Reichel sort of falls in between the two. Ruth Reichel, of course, is the wonderful food critic, restaurant critic for the New York Times. And I always think, whether you're interested in food or not, whether you're planning a trip to New York City or not, read her articles, her reviews, just because she is such a terrific writer.
Yeah,
her descriptions of these restaurants, and she just has a way with words. And I think that all came through in this book. And I love the fact that here's this woman, Ruth Reichel, who loves food, who clearly loves cooking. She was part of a restaurant collective during her college years, and whose mother was best known for inadvertently poisoning people at all these dinner parties because she never, she didn't take good care of the food she had. And in fact, Ruth Reichel says her mother was known as Queen of the Mold.
And there are wonderful descriptions of her mother preparing for these dinner parties and just like emptying everything out of the refrigerator, putting it in a pot. And Ruth Reichel, growing up, appointed herself as kind of the guardian of their guests, so that guests wouldn't get too close to the dishes that were a little bit iffy. And it's kind of amazing that she grew up to be such a lover of food and such an appreciator of good food.
Yeah, and I think that this book is one of those books that has a wonderful cover. I just love the cover of this. It's very, very, very evocative. And this is, I think this book is tragic in a way because Ruth Reichel's childhood and upbringing was not particularly happy. I think she's a person who has dealt with that in her life, and certainly what does not come through in this book is any sort of self-pity.
No, not at all. And you can see, though, how much I think food got her through a lot of situations. And with her her mother at one point just sent her off to a school in Montreal, and going home for weekends with her friend and eating these wonderful meals. And you can see if food was a real strand in her life.
Remember when she ate things she had never had, and I think she credits those visits to that childhood, her school friend, as giving her that introduction to loving the food that she and to be very adventurous in her eating.
Right, right. And it goes along, she talks very early about how you can tell a lot about people by the way they eat. And so true, I think all of our families have a special way of they make food and eat, and it's very telling.
Yes. This is a book, you said that Flanders got a little tiresome, the book, as it went on. And I thought that the first half of this book was much better than the second half. I think Ruth as a child is far more interesting than Ruth in college or Ruth as an adult.
Yeah, she's pretty young to be writing a memoir anyway.
Right.
But there also, one other thing you should notice is that there are great recipes in this book. And as we get to the holidays, what else would you like to read about except good eating?
Yes.
Great.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks so much for joining us. And we're here with Nancy Pearl from Center of the Book. Thanks for watching. Great.
Good job.
Be done.
You guys are so good.
Okay. I think it's by Gould. Lois Gould.
Public education. You're watching Public Affairs on KCTS. Local production and broadcast of KCTS Connects is made possible in part by KCTS members and by a major grant from the Floyd and Dolores Jones Foundation and by the Seattle Post-Intelligencer.
I'm Enrique Cerna. This is KCTS Connects for June 24th, 2004. Tonight, the Seattle Monorail Project We'll take up questions about the design, the route, and the cost. Call in with your questions and comments. Plus,
the scientists wanted to know where this place was, that these animals were having their babies, so that they could convince the Chinese government to safeguard it before the poachers could get there first.
climber Rick Ridgway and his inspiring mission to save an endangered species.
There are no atheists in foxholes.
I
When it
take a
comes
lot of offense to that
time to meet your
statement.
maker, then you know.
I take a lot of offense to that statement.
And a look back on our 5th season. The people, the issues, and the stories. Next on KCTS Connects. Hello and welcome again to KCTS Connects. It's been nearly 2 years since Seattle voters narrowly approved expansion of Seattle's monorail. The estimated cost is $1.75 billion. Last week, the Seattle City Council approved the so-called Green Line. The 14-mile route will run from Ballard to West Seattle. The council is expected to vote soon on allowing construction of the expanded monorail system. Still, there are many questions and concerns about the monorail design. How will it look on city streets? How will it impact neighborhoods and businesses? And of course, there is the cost. Is the money there to pay for the construction? In addition, there is an initiative campaign aimed at stopping construction of the monorail project. For now, construction bids have been delayed until August, mid-August. In spite of all this, the Seattle Monorail Project, the agency created to oversee the building and operation of the system, still expects to meet its groundbreaking goal set for this fall. So what are your questions and concerns about the new monorail? Join our conversation. Give us a call, toll-free, 1-800-258-6463. With us now to discuss the various issues surrounding this massive and controversial endeavor is Ann Levinson, the Deputy Director of the Seattle Monorail Project. John Magnuson is a licensed structural and civil engineer. He's also the chairman and CEO of Magnuson Klemensic Associates, I believe. He recently delivered strong criticism of the monorail design. Peter Sherwin was the sponsor of Initiative 53, the 2000 ballot that created a monorail plan. He spearheaded the plan for the current monorail expansion passed by voters in 2002. He's also the chief spokesperson for Monorail Now, a group that's trying to make sure that the monorail system is built. And we're also joined by Henry Aronson, a Seattle attorney and a critic of the monorail expansion. He's a member of On Track, a monorail watchdog group. Monorail. I end up saying that many, many times here. But this obviously is a very controversial issue, a touchy issue, and one that it is kind of grabbing us in this city. Well, John Magnuson, let me begin with you. It was about a month ago that you came forward and you held a press conference and you questioned the design and you raised some serious concerns about the monorail. You also said at that time that you were going to get together a panel of experts to look at the design and come up with some recommendations. It's been a month. What's happened?
Right. Actually, we breathed a little sigh of relief when we heard that the bids were extended 60 days because what we're reviewing is the request for proposals. It's a stack of documents about this thick. And the request for proposals is really the only protection that the taxpayers have under the design, build, operate contracting method, because that's exactly what specifies what we're, as taxpayers, buying.
So what are the panel now, this expert group?
I have seismic people looking at the seismic provisions, particularly for the West Seattle Bridge compared to the rest of the monorail line. I have architects looking at some of the station designs and what is and isn't incorporated into that document. And I have contracting people looking at some of the holes that might be there that a contractor could maybe go for change orders later on after the bids are already in.
Initially, you said that in about 2 weeks' time, from I think this was May 21st when you first came forward, that you would come forward with some recommendations, but what now?
What we're looking at is about the middle of July, which still leaves about a month before the bids are due, so that if there are changes that need to be made in the RFP, they can make those changes and have an addendum to the bid requirements so that the contractors can appropriately price what's to be provided.
What's your big concern?
My biggest concern is about the long term, and we're making a big investment as a community here, $1.75 billion. When you make that kind of an investment, you need to make sure that what you're doing is going to work not only when the monorail opens, not only in 2020, but we're involved in some transit projects down in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area right now, and their planning horizons are 2050 and 2070. We need to make sure that this system is going to be smartly designed so that our kids and our grandchildren don't say, what were you thinking when you built this?
Do you support the monorail, the building of the monorail?
I don't oppose it. I'm a little concerned. You know, the voters approved the system, so the voters spoke. However, there's also a lot of new information that has come up since then. For instance, if I were living in West Seattle or Ballard, and thinking about my transportation priorities, with what I know about the Alaskan Way Viaduct now, it would have a much higher priority than the monorail in terms of my mobility. I look at the list of transportation needs that our community has, and I think about if we were just starting with a clean slate and said, okay, we've got $1.75 billion, what's the highest priority place we should put it? It wouldn't be this line. Now, it is approved, and so we need to do the best that we can with what's there. I think that some of the things that were promised to the voters that they thought they were voting on when they voted yes are not there. They're not in the RFP.
In raising these questions, are you out to kill the project?
No. In fact, a lot of people said I was crazy to even raise the questions, that I would get killed because I'm in the business of building things. And a lot of our clients, architects that we work for that are employed now by SMP are not happy that I've raised these questions, because raising questions and saying we need to do this right, it might increase some costs. But to say, no, I'm not out to kill a project. In fact, up until a couple of months ago, we were part of one of the teams that was hoping to build it. And before that, before we got on that team, we had given free services to the monorail project to try to help them figure out how to make the columns smaller, primarily along 2nd Avenue, because that's where the biggest impacts are.
And Levinson, how do you allay the concerns that John Magnuson raises and the many issues that he raises here?
Well, first I want to thank John. I think it's terrific that civic leaders in Seattle care enough about this project that they want to try to help. Probably the issue that I hear most about his comments are that the folks who have already come aboard to build the monorail represent the best and the brightest from around the world in building transportation systems and transportation infrastructure. So to say that they haven't given it due thought, you've got some of the best designers. For example, the folks who are leading design for us was the team that had done design for the SkyTrain in Vancouver. The folks that are doing system work for us have done transportation systems in about 70% of the projects in the country. Folks that are doing construction are among the biggest in the world at doing this kind of work. And then you have the two teams that are competing to build the project. They, among themselves, have enormous expertise. They've been studying the request for proposals and the technical specifications for well over a year. So for them, they have all the expertise they need. They feel confident about the project. They've looked at the design, they've looked at the financing, they've looked at the structural engineering. They'd like the project to go forward, and they'd like to do the work on it.
But will you listen to what he has to say?
Oh, you bet. We listen to what everybody has to say. As you know, we've had 10,000 comments in our short time of existence. We've been out with hundreds of community meetings. We take input from everyone, whether it's on design, whether it's on finance, whether it's on their particular neighborhood needs. So his comments, Henry's comments, are welcome. Anything that can be added to the debate is terrific. But what we're about the business of is getting a transportation system, a mass transit system for Seattle, something that's been long overdue. We've been waiting decades for. It's going to get 20 million riders by the year 2020 out of their cars, improve the environment. Construction alone of the project, during each year of construction, you're talking about more than 2,000 jobs to the Seattle economy. So we don't want to play politics with this. We don't want to dabble in it. We're serious about building this, about building it right, about making sure the design is excellent, and about making sure we deliver a system that in Seattle people will be proud of for generations to come.
Well, I have to note here the fact that when you talk about this issue, when I said monorail, 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 there is an emotion with this whole issue. And I point out that we put a poll on every week, and we asked folks, are you opposed? Do you still endorse it? Our poll ended up getting skewed because somehow someone within both sides of the campaigns, we're not exactly sure who, although maybe our web people know, managed to skew the votes, and suddenly we had like 4,000 or 5,000 responses kind of going either way. So we know that this issue has a lot of traction with people and deep concern. And Henry Aronson, you're part of that as well as with the Watchdog Group. No. I'm not. You are a lawyer. I'm not insinuating anything that you did it. No, not at all. Not at all. No, I'm just bringing up your question here. Oh boy, let me backtrack on that one. But what you hear here, and still with your group as the watchdog.
Well, two quick responses, Dan. One, we're going to get 20 million riders. They're going to have 20 million riders. They're not going to have 20 million riders. It's 20 million trips. Most of those are round trips. So divide it by 2. It's 10, not 20. Secondly, 82% are coming off buses by your own numbers, but we'll get to that later. Our take is that this is a huge project, the largest project in the history of Seattle. And I'm intrigued again that Ann talks about the best and the brightest vetting it. No one was looking at this project independently until Nick Licata appointed something called the MTEP, the Monorail Technical...
Nick Licata, City Council member.
Yes, and he appointed the Monorail Technical Advisory Panel. The chairman resigned on April 17th, and I read his letter of resignation. He said, "I fear that without additional substantial resources and expertise devoted to these issues by the city will be ill prepared to effectively provide the level of review and oversight the project requires." He says, "I regret the decision to resign, particularly because I have personally and reluctantly come to the conclusion that the monorail project's in deep trouble, that it may become a huge disaster, and that therefore it desperately needs our attention. However, I do not believe the Monorail Technical Advisory Panel is able to effectively assist in this regard, and I don't feel comfortable participating." Now, with respect to the best and the brightest, that figure was used a bit earlier when they testified down in Olympia last year. The best and the brightest had come up with the best financial plan known. This had been more studied, more accurately reviewed than any plan. That plan came up 1/3 short. You had 1/3 less revenue, and they were asking the legislature for permission to sell bonds. And they had a dirty little secret, though. They had 1/3 less money than they told the people that they were getting, and they even kept that secret from the chair of your finance committee.
Ann Levinson, you want to respond? Also, Peter, I'll give you an opportunity to respond to this as well. Go ahead.
You bet. Well, that's creative. I appreciate the imagination that went into that, but...
creative.
Well, I was the only person testifying in a...
You design, and you've already got a contractor under contract, and then they start throwing delay claims against the owner.
Ann, go ahead. I want to...
Well, he's absolutely right, and that's how you manage a project like this. You make sure that you either have it in the contract or you retain it as agency costs, you look at the risks, you set aside contingencies, you require performance bonds, make sure that things get built. You require the companies that are the parent companies to put their bottom line on the line for the project. So they're not wrong, but the fact is we have thought of that as well. And the number of folks who are working behind the scenes to bring this project to fruition for the people of Seattle, not only are they bright and talented and hardworking people, they've all come to this project because they believe in public service. They agree with what John says, and that's why they're approaching it that way. So it's great to hear that. It's great to hear validation of the approach the project's taking.
Let me take another phone call here. I'm going to go to Donna. Go ahead, Donna.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm a resident of West Seattle, and I ride the bus every day from West Seattle to my job downtown, and I voted for the monorail. And I want to just make a couple points. First of all, that our bus system is excellent, but it's totally dependent on the same clogged surface roads as everyone else. And this morning I sat on the bus for over an hour and a half because there was an accident on the West Seattle Bridge. And I want to just also say that you can't get out of West Seattle if the bridge is shut down from a serious accident, and if and when the viaduct is rebuilt, we know that we'll have the same problems. So while the monorail may not be the perfect ultimate solution, it's a solution, and it's a start to building something that we've been way overdue.
Okay, thank you, Donna. I want to take another call here. I'm sorry there. I didn't mean to cut you off. Go to David here in Seattle. David? Hi, David. Are you there? I think David is there. Well, I guess I lost David. Let me bring up something else here. 4 Seattle mayors, former Seattle mayors, wrote a letter, Norm Rice, Paul Schell, Charles Royer, Wes Ullman, where they they urge the city council not to rush into a decision on the monorail, to insist on a most rigorous independent financial review. Now, and they said this, the Seattle Monorail project was set up for one purpose, to build a monorail. They've set out on a hurried, and he's talking about the project itself, they've set out on a hurried course to get this done and are resistant to any doubt that this course is the right one. Now, for 4 Seattle mayors to agree on anything is kind of, to write a letter together, I mean, that's pretty significant.
Right. You bet. Couple things. They didn't write the letter, but the person who did write the letter did ask them to sign it, and one of those mayors since then has said the letter's being used in a way that he didn't intend. But setting that aside for a moment, I had an opportunity in my professional career to work for 2 of those mayors, so I do know what they believe and how they think. And Norm Rice and Charlie Royer.
Okay.
They're both good men. All 4 of those are good men. It is ironic, however, that we have created a government that is making decisions, meeting every milestone, moving things along at a good pace, trying to cut down on process, trying to deliver to the taxpayers at the least expense. And we have folks saying, we have private sector folks saying, we have to slow this government down, it's moving too fast. In my 20 years of public service, I've never had anyone knock on the door of government and say, do more process, slow down, do more study. I've always heard them say, why can't government do business differently? Why can't government get anything done in this town? So we're quite proud of the approach we're taking. We're very open to reviews, we're very open to input, and I welcome the former mayor's participation. The point of the matter, though, is you have a tremendous opportunity in Seattle to finally provide a transportation alternative. We're at the cusp of doing that. And if we can break ground later this year, deliver to the voters by 2009 a 14-mile system to integrate with the light rail system, it would be a wonderful opportunity for Seattle.
A quick response.
Well, it's about money. And one of the things it has to be, we just have to at least know independently. And I ask Dan, what is going to be your position if the independent review shows that the line promised can't be built with the available money? Then what is your position?
There are a couple of answers to that, Henry. The first is, the first financial review is that done by the teams competing to build. They're the ones that are putting their assets on the line.
I'm talking about the independent financial review, not the one where the people are going to get over $1 billion to participate.
And who's doing that independent financial review?
Well,
Henry's talking about, the group he represents has proposed that the city council do an independent financial review.
So it has not been approved.
For the reason that the best and the brightest, Enrique, came up 1/3 short. They projected 1/3 more revenues than they in fact are going to receive. It now looks like it may be down to about 30%. But the question I ask you, Ann, is what is going to happen? What is going to be your response as one of the, I mean, you have a lot of people working hard. You have 22 people earning over $100,000 a year at the monorail. You had a high-paid group of people up there. What is your group going to say if the independent financial review says it isn't feasible, it can't be built for the amounts of money available to the agency?
So the first review will be by the teams competing to build. And then the next review will be by the folks who are responsible for reviewing and rating the bonds. Then there'll also be a review by the city council. I'm very confident that if they hire an expert who actually has public works experience, public finance experience, knows the market, has an ability to analyze this complexity of contract, that they'll come back and they'll give the same green light that the teams will give and that the rating agencies will give. In terms of your point about revenues...
How about answering the question, Ann, is what will your response be?
Henry,
You've got the D-bomb contractors, but let's stay on point.
Henry,
You have the May I finish? I
the
extended to you the courtesy of finishing. May I, Ann?
You bet. You could say whatever you like.
Go ahead, Henry. Make it fast.
I will. The D-bomb contractors have a huge vested interest in getting the contract in. They're not responsible for the agency costs. The bond agencies that are rating it make a wackadoodle selling the bond. They have a vested interest. My question to you, which you continue to dodge, is what will be the response of your agency if the independent financial review comes back and says it is not reasonable or foreseeable that the available monies are sufficient to build the project that had been promised?
If there's a quality financial review and it says that, then we would not go forward to construction. It's as simple as that. I'm not intending to dodge your question. What I am trying to say are that there are a number of folks, a number of firms, a number of entities with tremendous expertise who are involved in the project and looking at the project.
And were those the same people that projected revenues 1/3 higher?
No, the projection of revenues, as you know, was done during the campaign, which led up to the ballot measure. And as you also know, a large reason for the revenues not coming in as they were projected were a couple of things. One was evasion. The other was out-of-state cars. Those two loopholes have now been corrected, which returns $330 million to the bottom line of revenue. As you also know, since those revenue projections came in, the team over at the monorail, instead of doing what often folks do by going and asking for additional tax resources or saying we'll only build part of the project, instead rolled up their sleeves, went to work, looked for construction cost savings, looked for finance cost savings, and came up with a solution to bring us back even. So we now have revenues and costs in line.
I need to jump in here just because we're really running short of time, and I do want to. Peter's been trying to get in here, and I do want to give an opportunity to quickly say
one thing. The letter that was written for the mayors was written by Gogarty and Stark, the PR company that's advising On Track, according to them in the paper. So that's what Shell said, that's who it was written by. So, I mean, it had a little edge to it. So it wasn't just them sitting down one day having coffee and saying, we better write a letter to the city council. So that's the main point. I also want to add that Monorail now, and I've testified, we favor the financial review. I'm behind the financial review. I think we should do the financial review. And I think that there's the issue that the city council is doing the financial review. So if they don't approve of it, it's not even going to be left up to the agency. They're going to say you can't build it. So it's not really a situation that they're going to have to make that decision.
Enrique, I should make clear, though, too, we don't oppose a financial review. And we've said that publicly, that we don't oppose it. And a project of this magnitude, all the review you can get makes it a better project.
Okay, John.
I think that the discussion is completely missing one of the most important points, and that is the financial review talks about, do we have enough money to pay our bills? The more important point is, what are we actually buying? For instance, when I visited SMP staff to find out, to answer some of my questions, I tried to get answers before. And I said, have you built a model of the entire system? And they said, oh, yes, we have lots of models. And they took me back and they showed me models of stations. And these are models that have been used in community meetings and so on. Those models are not required in the RFP. The builder, the request for proposal, the builder does not have to build those models, those stations, those designs. And some of those designs they priced out at $14 million a piece and so on. And a basic station is $6 million a piece. So for each one of these stations, the public may think they're getting a $14 million version of the station, but they're only required to do the bare bones. And so part of it is, how much money are we spending and do we have the money? But the other part of it that is completely missed, that isn't covered by a financial review but would only be covered by a technical review, is what are you actually getting for the money?
And we have to leave it there on that question. There, you know, this is a huge issue. Obviously, it's going to be continuing to be right at the forefront through the summer to see whether you get to that point where you're going to break ground in the fall. We'll continue to follow it and through the summer and into the fall. I appreciate your time. Also, sorry if we were unable to take your call. We have some just spirited people here who decide to talk. Please send us your comments via email. We do want to hear from you. The address is connects@kcts.org. We're going to post your comments on our website. Thank you very much, John Magnuson, Henry Aronson, Peter Sherwin, Ann Levinson, and you guys can argue more when you leave here. Still to come, climber Rick Ridgway's mission to save an endangered species and a look back on the people and stories that we've covered during our 5th year on the air. Stay